Governing the Party, How the CPC Works, compiled by Chuntao. Preface. A history of 95 years, 87 million party members, and 67 consecutive years of being in power. These three figures are very rare in the world history of political parties. How does the Communist Party of China, CPC, work to govern the party? What are the secrets of its success? What will make the party progress in the future? These are questions of concern for not only CPC members, but also for people outside of the party and the country. In this book, we try to find answers to these questions. The CPC is a political party of the working class, taking Marxism-Leninism as its guidance and following the example of the Russian Communist Party, Bolshevik. However, it encountered difficulties upon its establishment. In a country where most people were farmers, only a few party members were workers. Mao Zedong corrected the wrong requirement on the qualifications of party members, saying that all those who were qualified and supported the party's guiding principles could be admitted to the CPC. He emphasized educating party members with advanced ideas and keeping party members within the bounds of strict discipline, exploring a new path of building a vanguard of the Chinese working class in a country where most people were farmers. After the People's Republic of China, PRC, was founded in 1949, Mao Zedong emphasized maintaining close ties with the people, as the party did during the war years. He adopted firm punitive measures against corruption and other problems among party members, so that the party maintained good conduct and a good image. To prevent party members from being divorced from the people, he also made long-term explorations and put forward many correct thoughts and ideas. However, as the party made mistakes in leading socialist construction, party building also went down a tortuous path. After the policy of reform and opening up was carried out in the late 1970s, Deng Xiaoping, based on experience and lessons learned, recognized the fundamental tasks as a ruling party and the requirements for party building. Then Jiang Zemin put forward the important thought of the three represents on the basis of a scientific judgment of the party's historical position. Hu Jintao, under new circumstances, put forward the concept of strengthening the party's governance capacity and its advanced nature. At the 18th CPC National Congress, 2012, Xi Jinping put forward enforcing strict party discipline, bringing new progress to party building. With long-term explorations since its foundation, the CPC has established the principle of strengthening the party theoretically and organizationally, improving its conduct, making it more able to fight corruption, upholding party integrity, and improving party rules and regulations. The CPC has a complete set of theories and measures to govern the party. Particularly since the 18th CPC National Congress, the CPC Central Committee, with Xi Jinping as General Secretary, has been strictly governing the party, significantly enriching the theories and practice of party building. This book includes 8 chapters. The first 3 chapters introduce the development of party building during the Democratic Revolution, before the reform and opening up, and after the reform and opening up. The other 5 chapters are about the party's efforts in strengthening the party theoretically and organizationally, improving its conduct, becoming better able to fight corruption, upholding party integrity, and improving party rules and regulations. We try to elaborate on party building based on the history of the party, discussing the problems encountered in different periods, how the CPC addressed these problems, and the effects of those measures, so that the readers can understand how the CPC governs the party. All the compilers and writers of this book are researchers from the Teaching and Research Department of CPC History at the Party School of the Central Committee of the CPC. Professor Chuntao serves as the chief compiler, and writers include Dr. Qi Xiaolin, Associate Professor Han Xiaoqing, Professor Shen Chuan Liang, Dr. Wu Wenlong, Dr. Sun Mingzheng, Dr. Ni Wenting, Professor Lu Yi, and Professor Li Qinggang. Elaborating on party building on the basis of party history is a new attempt, so this book still has room for improvement. We hope to make revisions in the future. Chuntao, June 2017. Chapter 1. Building a Revolutionary Party. The establishment of the CPC is the result of progress in Chinese modern history and part of the world communist movement. Since its establishment, the CPC actively participated in and led the revolutionary cause of the Chinese people. The building of the CPC itself is undoubtedly one of the decisive factors for the success of the Chinese Revolution. But the CPC also faced a tough problem: how to build a powerful proletarian political party in a country where most people were farmers and where feudal ideology was prevalent. In the early period of revolution, the CPC once had wrong requirements for the qualification of party members, but under the leadership of the first generation of leaders represented by Mao Zedong, the CPC soon reached an effective way to build a revolutionary party in educating party members with advanced ideas and upholding the organizational principle of democratic centralism and innovatively developing the theory of Marxist party building. This also laid a solid foundation for the success of the Chinese Revolution. Following the Russian path. After the Opium War in 1840, China experienced the Second Opium War, the Sino-French War, the Sino-Japanese War of 1894 to 1895, and some other wars, and had to sign some unequal treaties. After the eight-power Allied forces occupied the Chinese capital of Beijing, the Qing government was forced to sign the Boxer Protocol in 1901, and afterward, unequal treaties became more systematic. The Chinese nation was on the verge of national subjugation, and China was reduced to a semi-feudal and semi-colonial society. To resist foreign invasion and save the nation, the Chinese people had waged struggles again and again. Within the 80 years from the Opium War to the foundation of the CPC, Chinese people conducted many anti-imperialist and anti-feudal struggles, such as the Taiping Revolution, 1851 to 1864, the Reform Movement of 1898, and the Revolution of 1911. However, all these struggles failed. Although the Revolution of 1911 overthrew the Qing dynasty, 1644 to 1911, and put an end to the feudal system that had lasted thousands of years in China, it didn't bring China to the path of being independent, rich, powerful, and democratic. Imperialist powers intensified their invasion of China. Entangled warfare among warlords inside the country made life for the people intolerable. Chinese people with advanced ideas were depressed at the harsh reality. In 1914, World War I broke out. Japan occupied China's Qingdao in November of the year, with the excuse of fighting against Germany. In August 1917, China joined the Entente countries and became a victorious nation after the war ended. World War I unveiled all the conflicts and ills of the capitalist system in the West. After the war, all involved countries were in economic decline and chaos, and people lived in pain and decadence, dispelling the myth that capitalist civilization was perfect and superior. Through this war, Chinese intellectuals with advanced ideas recognized that there was no future for Western capitalism. Taking a skeptical attitude toward Western civilization, they started reflecting on and criticizing the capitalism in Western countries. After the victory of the October Revolution in Russia in 1917, the Soviet Union government issued systems, decrees, and policies that regarded working people as masters. In 1920, the Soviet Union government announced the waiver of its privileges in China. This aroused the interest of Chinese intellectuals, who felt for the working people and sought national independence. Socialism was then regarded as the embodiment of fairness and justice. China should have been considered a victorious nation after World War I, but the Paris Peace Conference nevertheless decided to transfer all the benefits Germany had in China's Shandong province to Japan. Failure in diplomacy and damages to sovereignty incited the Chinese people's resentment. The May 4th movement of 1919 broke out across the country, with young students fighting in the vanguard. The May 4th movement, organized by students, workers, and other people, was the first nationwide revolution in China's modern history against imperialism and feudal warlords. A number of Chinese people with advanced ideas who were exploring paths of saving the country and the people for democracy, independence, and national prosperity stood in the forefront of the movement. It was the reflection of Western capitalist civilization, the recognition of the people-oriented nature of the Russian Revolution, the regret for the Chinese nation's humiliation, and the appreciation of the Soviet Union's waiver of privileges in China that made Chinese intellectuals with advanced ideas more interested in Marxism after the May 4th movement. With Li Dazhao and Chen Duxiu as representatives, Chinese intellectuals with advanced ideas introduced major points of Marxism into China. In a materialist conception of history, they introduced ideas that social progress originates in productive forces and production relations, and the relationship between the economic base and the superstructure. In class struggle theories, they elaborated the definitions of class and class struggle, division of classes, as well as views that struggle between classes originates in economic interests. The country is the tool for class struggle. The proletariat must control political power, etc. In the theory of surplus value, they introduced views such as surplus value entails the exploitation of workers by the capitalist class, and noted that it was an important part of the accumulation of capital. Chinese intellectuals with advanced ideas regarded Marxism as a scientific theory that could reform China and advance the Chinese Revolution. Therefore, they set great store by the theories of class struggle and social progress. Through study and the spread of Marxism, a number of intellectuals with advanced ideas changed from radical nationalists into Marxists, and the communist groups they organized were the organizational foundation for the establishment of the CPC. The Communist International, 1919 to 1943, provided assistance to the establishment of the CPC. After the victory of the October Revolution in Russia in 1917, the international communist movement developed vigorously. In 1919, the Third International, also called the Communist International, was established under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin. It was a world organization of communist parties under the guidance of Marxism with the Russian Communist Party, Bolshevik, as the center. Lenin emphasized in theory the significance of national independence revolutions in colonial countries, and he also vigorously supported such revolutions in practice. Moreover, the newly born Soviet power was still surrounded by imperialist forces and reactionary forces inside the country. Considering national interests, the Russian Communist Party, Bolshevik, and the Soviet Union government must also support the Communist International to apply the Oriental strategy and support the communist movement in Oriental colonial and semi-colonial countries, and be willing to offer aid to revolutionary forces in Oriental countries, even when they are in economic difficulty. The Communist International set great store by setting up a communist party in China. It delegated representatives to China in 1920 and 1921 to guide the establishment of a communist party there. The first CPC National Congress was held in Shanghai on July 23, 1921, with 13 representatives across the country attending. This marked the foundation of the CPC, a milestone in Chinese history, which gave a complete new look to the Chinese Revolution. Unprecedented challenges. The CPC, immediately after being founded, led the Chinese people in the great anti-imperialist and anti-feudal struggle. It had explored, after 28 years of efforts, a revolution road with Chinese characteristics of encircling the cities from the rural areas. The building of the CPC had also been deepening as the Chinese Revolution progressed. The first challenge the CPC encountered was how to build a proletarian party in a country where most people were farmers. According to classic theories of Marxism and the Soviet Union's theories on communist parties, a proletarian party is led by and mainly relies on the working class. But the CPC was different, for it was established by intellectuals with advanced ideas and Marxist thoughts. All the 13 representatives to the first CPC National Congress were intellectuals, and most of the 53 party members were also intellectuals. During this period, Marxism was connected with the workers' movement in China, but the connection was not close. The Communist International criticized the CPC for staying isolated from the workers. At the Fourth Congress of the Communist International held in November of that year, Karl Radek, a member of the Presidium of the Communist International, severely criticized the CPC, saying that its members working in Guangzhou and Shanghai failed to consider the real conditions of workers, but merely researched Marxism-Leninism on paper. From the failure of the strike of Beijing Hankou railway workers in 1923, the CPC recognized the importance of strengthening leadership of the working class, and hence intensified its connection with the workers' movement. In May of that year, Grigory Voitinsky, who once assisted in the establishment of the CPC, published an article in Pravda, the official publication of the CPSU, saying that in 3 recent years, the Chinese working class had been forming and developing, and the CPC had grown from a small group of revolutionary intellectuals studying Marxism to a party of the Chinese proletariat and had entered the arena of Chinese politics. Later, the May 30th movement in 1925 and the Canton Hong Kong strike in 1925 to 1926 showed that the CPC had become the commanding center of the workers' movement. During this period, the CPC had also primarily established the thought of proletarian leadership. However, as the Northern Expedition, 1926 to 1927, extended rapidly, the party's leadership of the workers' movement couldn't keep up with the changes of conditions. For instance, during the workers' movement in Wuhan, the number of labor union members increased very rapidly. A large number of workers and coolies joined the revolution. They had the will of revolution, but most of them were poorly educated, and some of them even had characters of lumpen proletarians, imposing organizational problems for the workers' movement. Liu Shaoqi, leader of the workers' movement in Wuhan, later said that gangs of hooligans among workers were endangering the workers' movement. Moreover, the number of labor union leaders was inadequate, and the party's development fell behind that of the workers' movement. Only 4 party organizations were set up among all the 63 labor unions in Hankou, Hubei province. The CPC didn't fully play its role in leading demonstrations and other mass movements. Mikhail Borodin, the Communist International's chief agent to China in 1923 to 1927, once said the CPC's leadership was very weak. After the Great Revolution in China failed in 1927, the CPC took the road of encircling the cities from the rural areas and seizing power by armed force. This is a right path, conforming to the reality in China, but it also brought about a huge trial to the building of the CPC, how to build a proletarian revolutionary party in rural areas. Since October 1928, the CPC had felt concerned about the proletariat's decline in the organization and leadership of the CPC, which might turn the CPC into a farmers' party. Such concerns were never unnecessary. In 1927, when the 5th CPC National Congress was held, 50.8% of all the 57,967 party members were workers, while 18.7% were farmers. In 1928, when the 6th CPC National Congress was held, 76.6% of all the 40,000-plus party members were farmers, while only 10.9% of party members were workers. The proportion of workers among all party members further dropped to 7% in 1929 and to 1.6% in 1930. At the end of 1949, among all the 4.488 million party members, 12.24% were workers, while 75.8% were farmers. This indicated that as the focus of revolution was shifted to the rural areas, the CPC had to seek survival and development among the vast number of farmers. Suffering ruthless exploitation and oppression, Chinese farmers had the strong will of revolution. However, they were also selfish and undisciplined, which were the natural weak points of small producers. Under such conditions, ensuring the party's nature as a vanguard of Chinese working class and its correct leadership of the Chinese Revolution had become unprecedented challenges for the work of party building. To address these challenges, the Communist International and the CPC Central Committee once attempted to seek solutions from organizational development, focusing on the class status when admitting party members and rejecting intellectuals. The failure of the Great Revolution was once imputed to the wrong leadership of right opportunism by Chen Duxiu. That the party's leadership body was controlled by intellectuals coming from petty bourgeoisie was even considered as the root cause of opportunism, which had to be changed. In a report to the Communist International in September 1927, the CPC proposed to reform the party for the first time. At a provisional enlarged meeting of the Political Bureau in November 1927, the CPC Central Committee said the major organizational defect of the party at that time was that party officials were not workers or poor peasants, but representatives of intellectuals coming from the petty bourgeoisie. Those petty bourgeoisie, neither workers nor poor peasants, were not firm in political stands and not efficient at organizational work. They also brought the shortcomings of bias and illusions of the petty bourgeoisie into the CPC. All these were the origin of opportunism inside the party. Therefore, the most urgent task for the party in organizational development was to replace officials who had come from non-proletariat intellectuals with new officials coming from workers and farmers, and to ensure that guiding officials were all workers. Based on these views, the CPC Central Committee tried every way to admit industrial workers to the party after the failure of the Great Revolution, aiming at improving the purity of the party through increasing the number of party members coming from the proletariat to ensure the nature of the party and improve its fighting capacity. It said that intellectuals either held a completely negative attitude toward the revolution, or had betrayed the revolution, or had even spoken out theories of exterminating the Communist Party. This was a result of the development of revolution, but it also was linked to opportunism. The CPC believed that as the revolution continued, more intellectuals faced such risks, so the party must resolutely and strictly enforce its discipline and be determined to reform itself. At the provisional enlarged meeting of the Political Bureau in November 1927, the CPC Central Committee said that one of the major duties of party organizations was to admit revolutionary workers, peasants, and soldiers to the party. This indicated that intellectuals and petty bourgeoisie were excluded. The 6th CPC National Congress in 1928 decided that party building must focus on big cities and important industrial zones, for only in these places, with a vast number of workers, could the party establish the basis to improve its proletariat nature. Due to this reason, this Congress excessively emphasized the proportion of workers among Congress delegates and Central Committee members. Soviet Union leader Joseph Stalin once criticized that the CPC was led by Zhang Guotao, Ku Qiubai, and a few other intellectuals, so the CPC should select more workers for its central leadership body. As a reply to this opinion, the 6th CPC National Congress elected 21 workers among all the 36 members and alternate members of the Central Committee. The second plenary session of the 6th CPC Central Committee, held in 1929, emphasized that the key point in improving the quality of the party was the class status of party members, holding that it was completely correct to admit activists from workers to the party's leadership bodies. The third plenary session of the 6th CPC Central Committee, held in September 1930, decided that admitting as many proletarian members as possible should be the central task for the party. The class status of party members was emphasized to the utmost after the fourth plenary session of the 6th CPC Central Committee, held in January 1931. In a resolution on organizational development made on March 5, 1931, the CPC Central Committee said that the party's organizational development at that time was abnormal. Most of the party's 120,000 members were in the rural areas. The number of party members in major cities and factories was very small, and the number of party members coming from industrial workers was less than 2,000. Under such conditions, it was very difficult for the party to lead the intensifying revolution. Therefore, the focus of party building must be shifted to industries and cities, admitting more industrial workers to the party and encouraging party organizations to compete in admitting new members. Party organizations at various levels were once required to have at least 10% of proletarian members, and the number of new party members from workers was one of the indicators to evaluate the work of party organizations. However, this was obviously incorrect in theory and disregarded the realities. Building the party in ideology. The principles of party building set up at the 6th CPC National Congress were not successful, indicating that building the CPC must conform to China's realities and serve the practice of the Chinese Revolution. Otherwise, there would be serious problems in the building of the CPC, and the Chinese Revolution would also be endangered. The biggest challenge the CPC was facing at that time was actually to build the party in rural areas. Therefore, the decisions of focusing on major cities and appointing workers as leading officials had obviously deviated from this major task. Regardless of the power of the vast number of peasants, this didn't work in practice. Mao Zedong opposed this tendency. In an article written in 1929 titled, "A Single Spark Can Start a Prairie Fire," he said, "It would be wrong to abandon the struggle in the cities. But in our opinion, it would also be wrong for any of our party members to fear the growth of peasant strength, lest it should outstrip the workers' strength and harm the revolution. For in the revolution in semi-colonial China, the peasant struggle must always fail if it does not have the leadership of the workers. But the revolution is never harmed if the peasant struggle outstrips the forces of the workers." It was clear that Mao opposed the practice of focusing on major cities and appointing workers as leading officials. In the resolution he drew up for the Gutian Congress in 1929, Mao Zedong listed 5 qualifications for the admission of party members. 1. Without mistakes in political stand, including class awareness. 2. Being loyal. 3. Being committed to work. 4. Not aiming at seeking wealth. And 5. Not smoking opium and gambling. Detailed and clear, these qualifications didn't limit the class status of party members, but focused on their performance. This actually opened the door for the vast number of peasants to join the CPC, ensuring that the number of party members could be enlarged under harsh conditions. However, Mao's words went unheeded, because his position in the party at that time was not high. As a result, class status, instead of working performance, became the standard of evaluating party members. Those of bad class status were defined as dissidents and expelled from the party, regardless how hard they had worked for the party and carried out the party's policies. This mistake was not completely corrected until the Weiaobao Conference held in December 1935. The resolution adopted at the conference put forward for the first time that as a vanguard of the proletariat, the CPC should admit a large number of workers and farm laborers as the backbone of the party. Meanwhile, the CPC was also a vanguard of the whole nation. So all the people who were willing to carry out the CPC's ideas were able to apply to join the party regardless of their class status. The resolution said that in China, an underdeveloped semi-feudal and semi-colonial country, peasants and intellectuals coming from the petty bourgeoisie were the majority of party members. But this would never change the CPC's status as a Bolshevik party. Instead, this would make the CPC a melting pot for communism. With this decision, the number of party members increased rapidly from 40,000 plus in 1934 to more than 800,000 in 1940, and the CPC hence became a real major party in the country. Mao Zedong further elaborated the relationship between class status and admission to the CPC in his oral report delivered to the 7th CPC National Congress in April 1945. He said that the CPC was a proletariat political party, but in the party there were also members of other classes, such as peasants and intellectuals of other class status. However, class status should not be the standard of admission to the party. After joining the party, a person from the non-proletariat must transform himself into a proletariat in both thought and action. Breaking the restrictions on class status of party members, this laid the foundation for the development of the party and the victory in seizing political power in the country. Restriction of party members' class status was wrong in theory, but the main battlefield of the Chinese Revolution had been in the rural areas. The joining of a vast number of non-proletariat members, especially peasants, had effectively expanded the number of party members. But this also brought some problems that should not be neglected. Influenced by the small-scale peasant economy that was closed and backward, the peasant class had many weak points. Being selfish, conservative, and undisciplined, peasants were unable to give full play to their will of revolution. In his article, Problems of Strategy in China's Revolutionary War, written in 1936, Mao Zedong said, "They are the main forces in the Revolutionary War. But being small-scale producers, they are limited in their political outlook, and some of the unemployed masses have anarchist views, so that they are unable to give correct leadership in the war." This problem was particularly serious in the rural bases established in the early stage of the Agrarian Revolutionary War, 1927 to 1937. In his report to the CPC Central Committee in November 1928, Mao listed many problems in the Jinggangshan revolutionary base, such as localism, the question of the native inhabitants and the settlers, and the defection of the careerists. He pointed out that the economy in the revolutionary base was underdeveloped. The unit of social organization everywhere is the clan, consisting of people having the same family name. In the party organizations in the villages, it often happens that a branch meeting virtually becomes a clan meeting, since branches consist of members bearing the same family name and living close together. In these circumstances, it is very hard indeed to build a militant Bolshevik party, he said. Mao had recognized the significance of ideological leadership of the proletariat. The party organizations in the border area counties, which are composed almost exclusively of peasants, will go astray without the ideological leadership of the proletariat, he said. As of May 1929, the number of troops in the Fourth Army of the Red Army, led by Mao Zedong and Zhu De, had reached 8,000, among whom 1,329 were party members. accounting for 16.6% of the Red Army's main force. Among the party members, the numbers of workers, peasants, small tradespeople, and students stood at 311, 626, 106, and 192, accounting for 23.4%, 47.1%, 8%, and 14.5%, respectively, and the other 95 or 7% were of other class status. Party members coming from peasants and other petty bourgeoisie added up to more than 70% of all the party members. Due to frequent battles, the political and ideological work received inadequate attention, causing the spread of various non-proletarian ideas in the Fourth Army of the Red Army, hindering the implementation of the party's lines and undermining the fighting capacity and cohesive force of the army. To address these problems, at the 9th Party Congress of the Fourth Army of the Red Army, also called the Gutian Congress, held in December 1929, Mao Zedong creatively proposed the important principle of building the party in ideology. In the resolution he drew up for the Congress, Mao first analyzed the harm and causes of non-proletarian ideas. He said, "There are various non-proletarian ideas in the Communist Party organization in the Fourth Red Army, which greatly hinder the application of the party's correct line. Unless these ideas are thoroughly corrected, the Fourth Army cannot possibly shoulder the tasks assigned to it in China's great revolutionary struggle. The source of such incorrect ideas in this party organization lies, of course, in the fact that its basic units are composed largely of peasants and other elements of petty bourgeois origin. Yet the failure of the party's leading bodies to wage a concerted and determined struggle against these incorrect ideas and to educate the members in the party's correct line is also an important cause of their existence and growth." He then listed in detail various wrong ideas in the Fourth Army of the Red Army and proposed targeted measures to correct these mistakes, with ideological education being the thread of these measures. The resolution regarded ideological education as the most urgent task for the party in the Red Army. According to the resolution, to improve and expand the Red Army, the party must start from intra-party education. Therefore, carrying out intra-party education in a planned way should be one of the party's major tasks. The party must educate its members in the theories of Marxism and the awareness of being proletarian, establishing the proletariat outlook on the world, and overcoming various non-proletarian ideas with proletarian ideas, so as to transform party members into being proletariat in ideology. This new idea of building the party in ideology with intra-party education as the main form was the creative contribution of Mao Zedong to the Marxist theory of party building. Practice has proved that it is the correct way to build a proletariat political party that conforms to China's realities. It fundamentally solved the problem of how to build a powerful proletariat political party, where most party members were peasants. In the early stage of the War of Resistance against Japan, 1937 to 1945, the CPC expanded very rapidly. However, many new party members had not gone through strict organizational training, and party organizations in many places were very lax. Moreover, many party members were not interested in studying theories, with excuses such as being busy in combat or unable to understand the theories. Some thought they could be excellent party members only if they were firm in mind, for revolution and brave in battles, so study of the theory of Marxism-Leninism was not important. Some party members thought good class status would be enough for them to become excellent proletarian fighters. So there were many party members who had joined the Communist Party organizationally, but had not yet joined the party wholly or at all ideologically. To change such circumstances, the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee decided on August 25, 1939, to strengthen the education inside the party on Marxism-Leninism, on class, and on the party. and the party must strengthen education of its officials at all levels. Mao Zedong also said, "We must, in all seriousness, put things in order, both ideologically and organizationally, if we are to develop the revolutionary movement more effectively and bring it to speedier success. To put things in order organizationally requires our first doing so, ideologically, our launching a struggle of proletarian ideology against non-proletarian ideology. To strengthen party building on the basis of Marxism-Leninism, the CPC Central Committee established in February 1939 the Department of Education of Cadres, with Zhang Wentian acting as head of the department and Li Weihan as deputy head. In early 1940, the Publicity Department and the Department of Education of Cadres of the CPC Central Committee were reorganized into the Department of Publicity and Education, which was responsible for leading the party's learning campaigns. The CPC Central Committee had organized several learning campaigns and issued a series of instructions. By October 1940, a complete set of systems for the education of party members had been set up, making education on Marxism-Leninism an important part of the party's work. This was an important measure of the CPC in building the party ideologically. The Yan'an Rectification Campaign was an important measure the CPC adopted to seek unity and build the party ideologically. From September 10th to October 22nd, 1941, the CPC Central Committee held 5 enlarged meetings of the Political Bureau to discuss the lines in the history of the party and review experience from history. Political Bureau members attending the meetings included Mao Zedong, Ren Bishi, Wang Jiaxiang, Wang Ming, Zhu De, Luofu, also known as Zhang Wentian, Kang Sheng, Chen Yun, Kai Feng, also known as He Kequan, Bogu, aka Qin Bangxian, and Deng Fa. Other senior officials attending the meetings included Li Fuchun, Yang Shangkun, Luo Mai, Chen Boda, Gao Gang, Lin Bok, Ye Jianying, Wang Rofei, and Peng Zhen. These meetings reviewed the mistakes of subjectivism and factionalism in the party's history and the work in Yan'an, and achieved unanimity among the central leadership. The CPC Central Committee decided during these meetings to launch a rectification campaign among senior officials, overcoming mistaken ideas and improving their understanding of theories through study of the ideological method of Marxism-Leninism and the history of the party. In the course of these meetings, the CPC Central Committee decided on September 26th to set up a central group for study to organize senior officials in Yan'an for the study of Marxist-Leninist theories and summarizing the historical experience of the party. Mao Zedong acted as head of the group. The committee also decided to set up high-level study groups in places outside Yan'an and issued organizational rules for these groups. In accordance with this decision, study groups were set up in Yan'an and other places to study the party's documents and history since the 6th CPC National Congress, as well as the ideological methodology of Marxism-Leninism. After adequate preparation, the Yan'an Rectification Campaign started in 1942 throughout the party. Great success was achieved in the 3-year campaign, imposing far-reaching influence on the party's development, especially in promoting the unity of the party. Before the Yan'an Rectification Campaign, doctrinarism was deeply rooted within the party, and many party members regarded the experience of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and the instructions of the Communist International as infallible principles to blindly apply. Through the Rectification Campaign, the CPC broke down the blind faith in the Communist International and brought ideological emancipation to the whole party. As Zhou Enlai said, the Rectification Campaign led by Mao Zedong brought an unprecedented ideological emancipation to the party, which was a great progress in thought. The Yan'an Rectification Campaign freed party members and officials from doctrinarism, corrected their understanding of Marxism, and primarily established the ideological line of seeking truth from facts, breaking down blind faith in the Communist International, correcting the wrong tendency in the late 1920s and early 1930s that blindly applied Marxism and instructions of the Communist International, and clearing all the obstacles in applying Marxism to Chinese realities. After the Yan'an rectification campaign, Mao Zedong's thought was written into the party constitution at the 7th CPC National Congress in 1945, and then became the guiding thought of the whole party. Establishing Mao Zedong's thought as the party's guiding thought reflected the party's deep understanding of the rule of applying Marxism to Chinese realities, showing that the CPC had become increasingly mature in its theories. It deepened the party's understanding of the line, principles, policies, and strategies of the Chinese Revolution. Mao Zedong's thought, hence, became the political and ideological ground for the work that united the whole party's actions and mind in the course of the Chinese Revolution, significantly facilitating the victory of the War of Resistance against Japan and China's War of Liberation, 1946 to 1949. The Yan'an rectification campaign created the method of solving intra-party problems and building the party in ideology with rectification campaigns, greatly developing the Marxist theory of party building. At the 7th CPC National Congress, held in 1945, Mao Zedong said, "Ideological education is the key link to be grasped in uniting the whole party for great political struggles. Unless this is done, the party cannot accomplish any of its political tasks." This further illustrated the significance of putting top priority on ideological education in party building. To achieve this, Chinese communists represented by Mao Zedong also created the rectification form of criticism and self-criticism throughout the party and proposed the principles of unity, criticism, unity, and the purpose of learning from past mistakes to avoid future ones and curing the sickness to save the patient, with the aim of improving the theories of building the party in ideology. Strict democratic centralism. Institutional building has also played an important role for the CPC to develop rapidly and successfully seize the power of the country, besides breaking the limit on the class status of party members and focusing on party building in ideology. Particularly, strict implementation of democratic centralism has ensured an institution the party's correct political leadership and given full play to the enthusiasm and creativeness of all the party members and officials, guaranteeing the victory of revolution nationwide in 1949. The CPC had established democratic centralism as one of its organizational principles and systems in the early stage after its establishment. The first program adopted at the first CPC National Congress didn't use the term democratic centralism, but in a proposal submitted by Chen Duxiu for discussion, a similar term, democratic centralization, was used. The first CPC National Congress recognized the Soviet management system, which was an organizational form reflecting democratic centralism. This indicated that the newly established CPC had known about democratic centralism in the Soviet Union. In the party constitution adopted in the second CPC National Congress and other important documents adopted in the third and fourth National Congresses, the term democratic centralism was not used, but the essence of democratic centralism was reflected. As practice and understanding developed, the Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee revised the party constitution on June 1, 1927, making clear that democratic centralism was the party's guiding principle. This is the first time that the CPC put forward the concept of democratic centralism and wrote it into the party constitution. At that time, however, the CPC was in its infancy, being immature not only politically and ideologically, but also organizationally. For instance, there was normal democracy and centralization within the party, with paternalism and ultra-democracy prevalent. The 6th CPC National Congress, held in October 1928, pointed out the problem of paternalism within the party, where there was no Bolshevik spirit of criticism and collective discussion or Bolshevik-style education and training, but only high-handed orders and rigid obedience. Meanwhile, there was also ultra-democracy within the party, where the lower level didn't trust the higher level, and some even incited the lower level to oppose the higher level for personal feelings. Zhou Enlai also criticized these two wrong tendencies in a document he drafted in November 1928. These had definitely damaged the party's basic principle of democratic centralism, and the democratic spirit of criticism and self-criticism turned the party's disciplinarians into rigid ones, expanded the tendency of implicit obedience, and impeded the flexible and creative development of Marxism inside the party, bringing severe losses to the revolutionary cause. In the resolution he drew up for the Gudian Congress in 1929, Mao elaborated in a systemic way the principle of democratic centralism. According to him, ultra-democracy and the disregard of organizational discipline were among incorrect ideas in the Fourth Red Army. Examples of ultra-democracy included erroneous demands that the Red Army should apply democratic centralism from the bottom to the top, or should let the lower levels discuss all problems first, and then let the higher levels decide. Examples of disregard of organizational discipline included failure of the minority to submit to the majority and criticism made without regard to organizational discipline. The resolution made it clear that democratic centralism is the organizational principle of the CPC, and it elaborated on the content of democratic centralism. Criticizing various incorrect tendencies, the resolution provided methods of correction based on analysis of detriments and root causes of these tendencies. After the Zunyi Conference in 1935, as the party was strengthened and became mature, Chinese communists, represented by Mao Zedong, were deepening the understanding of democratic centralism, especially stressing intra-party democracy during the War of Resistance against Japan. In his concluding speech at the CPC National Conference in May 1937, Mao required the party to practice democratic centralism to stimulate the initiative of the whole membership. There was more centralism during the period of reaction and civil war. In the new period, centralism should be closely linked with democracy. Let us apply democracy, and so give scope to initiative throughout the party, he said. In the present great struggle, the Chinese Communist Party demands that all its leading bodies and all its members and cadres should give the fullest expression to their initiative, which alone can ensure victory, Mao said at his report to the 6th plenary session of the 6th CPC Central Committee in October 1938. The exercise of such initiative depends on the spread of democracy in party life. It cannot be brought into play if there is not enough democracy in party life. The extension of democracy in the party should be seen as an essential step in its consolidation and development, and as an important weapon enabling it to be most active in the great struggle, to prove equal to its tasks, create fresh strength, and surmount the difficulties of the war, Mao said. During this period, Liu Shaoqi also actively initiated intra-party democracy, repeatedly emphasizing that damaging both centralism and democracy was a violation of discipline. He thought that without real democracy, there would be no real centralism. If opinions and the rights of all comrades were not respected and all good suggestions were not accepted, the party would be unable to unite the whole membership for combat. Sectarianism was an obstacle for the party to conduct democratic centralism because it hindered inter-party unity and solidarity, and hindered the party in its tasks of uniting the people. Sectarianists saw only the interests of the part and not the whole, forgetting the system of democratic centralism and asserting the independence of the CPC Centri Committee. In the early stage of the War of Resistance against Japan, Wang Ming was the leader of the CPC's Yangtze River Bureau. He asserted independence again and again in an attempt to place himself above the CPC Central Committee, and even usurped the name of the Central Committee in order to release documents again and again. Such sectarianist behaviors later influenced some other places. The Political Bureau of the CPC Central Committee adopted on September 1, 1942, a decision to conduct unified leadership in anti-Japanese bases and readjust the relations between organizations, which said that leadership in anti-Japanese bases was unified in general. But in some regions, there were problems, such as poor understanding of unified leadership, being out of step, each acting on his own without mutual coordination, etc. Therefore, the CPC Central Committee decided to adopt a unified leadership, requiring that the minority be subordinate to the majority and the entire membership to the Central Committee. This was of decisive significance to unify the party's leadership. The decision of the CPC Central Committee required local leadership bodies to obey instructions of the CPC Central Committee when formulating policies and systems, and they must ask the CPC Central Committee for instructions when deciding new issues involving the whole country, the whole party, and the whole army, and should not decide for themselves and damage the party's unified leadership. Party, government, military, and civilian organizations at lower levels were not resolute in implementing the resolutions, decisions, orders, and directives of organizations at higher levels or of the Central Committee. They complied in public, but opposed in secret, or didn't ask the higher level or the Central Committee for instructions while solving new problems or those that should not have been decided by them. These were all behaviors of impurity in party spirit, and they damaged unity. The decision also prohibited officials at various levels from giving opinions or speaking in the radio about issues involving the whole country, whole party, and whole army without the approval of the CPC Central Committee. As said in the decision, without approval of the party organizations at the same or higher levels, a senior party official's expression of political views was a serious violation of the party's organizational principle, which would damage the party's unity. The 7th CPC National Congress was held in 1945. In his report on the amendment to the party constitution, Liu Shaoqi elaborated the significance of democratic centralism in the party's organizations, leadership, and the seizure of state power. He clarified the essence of democratic centralism, put forward detailed requirements and norms of democratic centralism, emphasized that centralism must be based on democracy, while democracy must be guided by centralism, establishing a series of principles governing the relationship between the individuals and organization, minority and majority, lower levels and higher levels, the whole membership and the Central Committee as well as the Central Committee and local committees. This was the first time in the party's history that democratic centralism had been elaborated in a systemic way, indicating that the theory of democratic centralism had become mature. During the War of Liberation, for the guerrilla practice established during the War of Resistance against Japan, some local party and military leading organizations rashly formulated, without approval of leading organizations entrusted by the CPC Central Committee, decisions going against lines and policies of the CPC Central Committee. In the party, there were problems such as localism, empiricism, not asking for instructions before an event, not reporting after an event, exaggerating achievements but glossing over or even withholding mistakes, taking an incautious attitude toward matters of principle, etc. The CPC Central Committee worked vigorously to correct these mistakes inside the party and the army. In January 1948, Mao Zedong drafted a directive for the CPC Central Committee titled On Setting Up a System of Reports, requiring that for each bureau or sub-bureau of the Central Committee, the secretary was responsible for submitting to the Central Committee and its chairman a comprehensive bi-monthly report, written by himself, not by his assistants. The report should cover military, political, land reform, party consolidation, economic, propaganda, and cultural activities, the problems and tendencies that have arisen in these activities, and the methods of dealing with them. Leaders of field armies and military areas, apart from their obligation to submit reports and requests for instructions on matters of strategy when necessary, and their obligation to submit monthly reports on combat gains, losses and munitions consumed, and the actual strength of their forces, must also submit comprehensive policy reports and requests for instructions every 2 months. On March 25th, the CPC Central Committee issued supplementary directives on setting up a system of reports, requiring various central bureaus, sub-bureaus, and front committees to submit every directive and reply they issued to their lower levels to the Central Committee. The reports delivered from lower levels to various central bureaus, sub-bureaus, and front committees must also be reported, if important, to the Central Committee. The Central Committee required that every member and alternate member of the committee should have the obligation and right to individually report to the Central Committee or chairman of the committee, or state their opinions. He severely criticized that some local party committees didn't ask for instructions before an event and not report after an event, and regarded this as an extremely bad habit. Having endangering the revolution, this must be overcome resolutely. At the Political Bureau meeting in September, Mao emphasized again to change the act in defiance of organizational discipline and required the whole party to strengthen discipline. The meeting also adopted a resolution to set up a system of reports by central bureaus, sub-bureaus, military areas, and front committees to the Central Committee, aiming at centralizing all the powers that must be centralized to the CPC Central Committee and strengthening the party's centralized and unified leadership. To ensure the whole party formulate and implement correct policies and strategies, the CPC Central Committee emphasized expanding inter-party democracy, strengthening collective leadership, and conducting democracy in decision-making. At the enlarged meeting of the Political Bureau held in September 1948, Mao proposed further expanding inter-party democracy, saying that improving democracy in the party was important to accomplish various tasks of the September meeting. The September meeting adopted a resolution of convening party congresses and representative meetings at various levels, providing detailed regulations on building and expanding the normal democratic life in the party. After the meeting, Mao Zedong drafted a decision titled On Strengthening the Party Committee System, which said the party committee system was an important party institution for ensuring collective leadership and preventing any individual from monopolizing the conduct of affairs. From now on, a sound system of party committee meetings must be instituted in all leading bodies, from the bureaus of the Central Committee to the prefectural party committees, from the party committees of the fronts to the party committees of brigades and military areas, subcommissions of the Revolutionary Military Commission or leading groups, and the leading party members' groups and government bodies, people's organizations, the news agency, and the newspaper offices. All important problems, of course not the unimportant, trivial problems, or problems whose solutions have already been decided after discussion at meetings and need only be carried out, must be submitted to the committee for discussion, and the committee members present should express their views fully and reach definite decisions, which should then be carried out by the members concerned. The same procedure should be followed by party committees below the prefectural and brigade levels. In the higher leading bodies, there should also be meetings of the leading cadres in the departments, for example, the propaganda department and the organizational department. Commissions, for example, the labor, women's and youth commissions. Schools, for example, party schools. And offices, for example, the research offices, he said. All these decisions of the CPC Central Committee greatly improved the party's collective leadership and strengthened inter-party democracy, laying solid institutional foundation for the victory of China's War of Liberation. End of Chapter 1.